Welcome, my maid. Even though she knows I'm here to meet for a marriage proposal, this is the first thing she says. I let out a confused sound, thinking I must have heard wrong. My future mother-in-law, Olivia, looks at me with a mean smile and says, "Oh, you're not the maid. You have such a poor-looking face." The fiancé I thought was on my side, Scott, betrayed me in the worst way. He glanced at my face and burst out laughing. "You're right, she does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents." "Really? I wonder if your parents would faint from shock at seeing a house as wealthy as ours," Olivia added. Olivia and Scott kept looking down on me, even making fun of my parents. I couldn't take it anymore and sent a message to my father while they weren't looking. He replied quickly, saying he would come right away. "I'm going to get some fresh air," I said, unable to bear Scott's insults any longer. "Don't run away." Scott's rude laughter echoed as I left to wait for my father's arrival. 15 minutes later, I introduced my father, Richard, to Scott and his mother. "Here's the slave's father," Scott said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not smiling. "Wait, father, mother," Olivia said, her face going pale when she recognized my father. "I am Kelly, turning 31 this year, working in a small company. I've lived my life trying not to stand out. That's why I usually wear just foundation and prefer navy or black clothes. I don't wear contacts and instead have thick glasses because of my high prescription. The reason for being so low-key is that my father had a high-profile job, and it influenced me since childhood. My father is an actor. He was quite popular back in the day, often surrounded by women when walking through town. Though he usually played supporting roles, he still appears on TV quite often and is moderately well known. Middle school was tough because of my father. Classmates would ask for his autograph, and their parents wanted to meet him. Since I refused all these requests, I was often criticized. I must have seemed unfair to them. I even faced bullying from jealous classmates. I didn't want to trouble my dear father, and I also hated the idea of being seen as showing off. Struggling with these thoughts, I dressed simply and went to a high school where no one knew me. Luckily, I had a common last name, so I could live normally from then on. Because of my plain appearance, men didn't approach me, allowing me to enjoy a carefree student life. I loved talking about comics with my female friends, and those times felt like the happiest moments for me. I met my fiancé, Scott, after I started working. Scott worked for the company that leased the copy machines to the place where I worked. I didn't talk to him much at first. Scott would come to check on the copy machine, and we would exchange a few words during his visits. Our relationship changed a lot one day when the copy machine broke. I was busy preparing materials for a meeting the next day, and when the machine stopped working, I panicked. I wouldn't be able to get the materials ready without it, so I called Scott. Scott came quickly and checked the copy machine. "Can it be fixed?" I asked him, worried. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." I fell in love with Scott's smile right then. Unfortunately, the copy machine couldn't be fixed, but Scott arranged for a replacement. We managed to prepare the materials in time for the meeting. Having fallen for Scott, I made an effort to get closer to him. I asked for his contact information and called him often. Then I confessed my feelings to Scott, and we started dating. Scott was always very kind. He was always considerate, and I had never seen him angry. I thought he would continue to be kind even after knowing about my father. So, after dating for 2 months, I boldly proposed to Scott, and he happily accepted. I remember being very happy. However, there was one thing that worried me, my appearance. I had always worn thick glasses, even on dates, and I dressed plainly. It was a habit that was hard to break. The real me looked just like my father, with distinct features because of my appearance. In middle school, other girls envied me, and I've been judged by boys because of how I look. It was tough, but I thought it would be okay with Scott. I planned to change my appearance little by little for the man I loved. However, after getting engaged to Scott, I started feeling more uncomfortable. Before our engagement, Scott seemed kind, but recently, he started making comments that made me feel bad. The other day, we went to a bridal fair to choose a wedding venue because Scott suggested it. The place he took me to was very fancy. It was a beautiful guest house perfect for a big wedding with over 200 guests. Seeing that, I felt confused. I don't have many friends from school, and I didn't want to stand out. I had hoped for a small ceremony at a smaller venue. I wanted to go home right away, but Scott seemed to be having a good time, so I didn't bring it up. I stayed and went along with it. After it was over, we stopped by a cafe, and Scott was in a great mood. The wedding venue we saw earlier was nice, wasn't it? I'd like something even more extravagant, he said while drinking coffee. I felt anxious and decided to tell Scott what I wanted. I was thinking a small wedding with just the two of us might be nice. I don't like standing out too much. I thought kind Scott would understand. However, the reality was very different. Scott looked at me and laughed in a mean way. A plain girl like you wouldn't fit in a place like that. There's probably no dress that suits your thick glasses. I was shocked by Scott's comment. Isn't a wedding about both families? I asked. My family is wealthy, and not having a big wedding would be embarrassing, he continued. I was speechless. The Scott who had always been kind was now looking down on me like he was a different person. I was deeply hurt by his attitude. To my confusion, Scott made an even worse comment. You should just keep quiet and do as I say, he added. Scott looked at me with a serious face and said, A plain woman like you should be grateful to get married at all. His harsh words shocked me, and I even felt scared. Then, suddenly, Scott smiled and said, I'll decide everything for you, so you just need to do what I say, okay? I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled awkwardly. Maybe getting engaged to Scott was a mistake, but it was too late to pretend it never happened. I had already told our parents and my company about our engagement. Despite everything, I still loved Scott. I hoped he would go back to being the kind person he was before we got engaged. So, even though I was confused by Scott's changes, I felt I had no choice but to continue with the engagement. Scott kept making comments that troubled me, and with each one, my heart felt more hurt. But I couldn't bring myself to hate him. Even when I thought about breaking up, I remembered the kind Scott I used to know. I still loved him. So despite my confusion, I stayed in the relationship. Then, one day, something happened that confused me even more. It was the day Scott and I finalized our wedding venue. After visiting several places, Scott chose the luxurious guest house we first visited. With pride, he said, A lavish ceremony really suits me. It's unfortunate for you, though. Scott laughed, and it hurt me. We went to the guest house to sign the paperwork. On the way, I saw someone I didn't expect. Oh, is that you, Scott? It was a woman. Scott looked surprised and said, Mom, what are you doing here? He then introduced us. Kelly, this is my mom, Olivia. Mom, this is Kelly, my fiancée. I told you I was getting married, remember? Olivia greeted me with a smile and said, I'm Scott's mother. You seem like a serious woman. Where do you work? You must be working at a big company, right? This was my first time meeting Scott's mother. I nervously told her about my company and that I do clerical work. Olivia made a puzzled face and said, I've never heard of that company. Scott then joined our conversation and said, Kelly's company is one of my clients. It's a small company with about 20 employees, so it's natural you haven't heard of it. After hearing Scott's explanation, Olivia's face turned grim. I thought since you were Scott's fiancé, you'd be working at a more reputable company. Doesn't that mean your salary is low? Are you planning to make Scott suffer? Olivia's words caught me off guard. I felt embarrassed and quickly said, I'm sorry, my salary isn't very high at my current job. I had no choice but to apologize to Olivia. Olivia sighed heavily and said, Can you at least not rely entirely on Scott? Our family is from a distinguished background. We don't need a woman with a questionable background. I didn't know how to respond to her harsh words. Olivia continued, "What about your parents? They work at reputable companies, right?" She glared at me with narrow eyes. My father is," I started to answer, but then I noticed something familiar in her bag and stopped talking. Seeing my confusion, Scott spoke up. "Come on, Mom, calm down. We're going to visit the house and make our marriage introductions soon, all right?" Olivia didn't look happy and glared at me with a sour expression. It was clear that my first impression on her was terrible. The path to marriage seemed difficult, and I sighed quietly. Then came the day of the marriage introduction. "Wow," I muttered as I stood in front of Scott's family home. It was far beyond anything I had imagined. Olivia had mentioned that their family was distinguished, so I expected them to be wealthy, but the reality was astonishing. The gate was automatic, there was an elevator inside, and there were even 10 luxury cars parked outside. They must be my future father-in-law's hobbies, I thought. Scott then said to me, "Dad is out for work today. It's just Mom, so make yourself comfortable," with a smile, but I felt even more nervous. Olivia had been so harsh to me last time, and I feared she would make more sarcastic remarks. Scott and I entered the living room where Olivia was waiting. "Hello, thank you for the other day," I greeted her politely. The next moment, Olivia said something unbelievable. "Welcome, my maid." Even though she knew I was here for a marriage introduction, this was the first thing she said. "What?" I let out a confused sound, thinking I must have heard wrong. Olivia looked at me with a mean smile and said, "Oh, you aren't the maid? You've got such a poor-looking face." I couldn't believe she said something so awful. Then Olivia laughed, clearly enjoying herself, and said, "Scott told me it's okay to treat you like a maid." It seemed like Scott just wanted to marry someone who would do whatever he said. "Too bad for you, Scott," Olivia said with a smirk. "What do you mean?" I asked Scott, feeling pale and hoping it was a bad joke. I wanted to believe it wasn't true, but the fiancé I thought was on my side betrayed me in the worst way. Scott glanced at my face and burst out laughing. "You're right, she does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents. Maybe we could use them as our servants too," he said, laughing crudely. "Indeed," Olivia added, "having someone obedient for free is quite nice. But if they come to a rich house like ours, I wonder if Kelly's parents would faint from shock." Olivia and Scott kept looking down on me, and Olivia asked with a laugh, "By the way, what does your father do? He's not homeless, is he?" Scott burst into laughter and replied, "Mom, that's not a job. Given how Kelly is, he probably doesn't have a stable job." This is making my stomach hurt from laughing. Scott and Olivia continued to mock my parents, assuming my family was poorly educated and must have a plain appearance. I gritted my teeth in frustration, unable to bear their rude comments. They even looked down on my parents. I couldn't take it anymore and sent a message to my father while Olivia and Scott weren't looking. "I need you to come now," I wrote, and I also sent him the address of Scott's family home, which Scott had sent me for today's marriage introduction. I remembered it was my father's day off, so he must be relaxing at home. Luckily, my father replied within a minute, saying, "I'm on my way." Feeling relieved, I told Scott and Olivia, "I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'm going to get some fresh air." I couldn't stand listening to Scott and his remarks any longer. I thought I would wait outside quietly until my father arrived. "Oh, is that so? Well then, Scott, why don't we continue our tea leisurely?" Olivia said, pleased to be alone with Scott. "Kelly, don't you run away," Scott added, his crude laughter echoing as I left. I left my seat and waited outside for my father to arrive. 10 minutes later, he showed up wearing dark sunglasses. "Kelly, what's wrong? Today was supposed to be your marriage introduction, right?" he asked, looking puzzled. Seeing my father, I felt relieved and started to cry, even though I tried hard to hold back the tears. "What's wrong, Kelly?" my father asked, now worried. I explained everything to him, how Scott's attitude changed after we got engaged, and how Olivia joined in looking down on me. I can't forgive them for treating you like that, he said. My father listened quietly but was clearly angry. I told him more about what Olivia had said, and my father laughed. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. We're going in now. I'll make sure they regret hurting you, he said firmly. With my father's support, I made up my mind. My love for Scott had faded, replaced by anger. We'll make Scott and his mom regret it, I thought as I put on my father's sunglasses. Together, we entered Scott's family home. I stood in front of Scott and Olivia with my father by my side. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said, standing tall. Olivia, who had initially laughed at me, became stunned when she saw the man beside me. I realized people freeze when they are too surprised. Olivia must have thought she could say something terrible again when I returned, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. I planned to make her pay for her behavior. Olivia already recognized who my father was. My father is the maid's father, I said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were stern. His handsome face made him look even more imposing. Olivia, who recognized my father, was shocked. How could this be? Why is Richard here? Is this some kind of joke? She asked, her cheeks turning red and her eyes sparkling like a young girl's. Scott stood there, clueless and stunned. My father didn't answer Olivia's questions, but kept staring at her and Scott. Olivia blushed under his gaze, which was quite embarrassing for a woman of her age. I looked at Olivia with a cold stare. Scott, now regaining his composure, asked in confusion, Richard? Mom, is he a friend of yours? Scott probably didn't know about my father. He's quite well known among Olivia's generation, but younger people might not recognize him unless they watch TV dramas. Olivia glared at Scott. Scott, how rude of you. This man is a famous actor and my first love. Scott looked shocked and confused. Then Olivia turned to my father, smiling and speaking to him. I'm a big fan of yours, Richard. See, look at this, she said, pulling out her purse to show my father a keychain that only fan club members can buy. I've been a fan for over 22 years, she added, expressing her admiration. Mom, Scott seemed appalled by Olivia's sudden change in behavior. Olivia continued talking to my father, clearly thrilled to see her favorite actor. However, my father's gaze on Olivia was stern. After remaining silent, my father finally spoke up. I understand that you're a fan of mine. However, did you try to treat my precious daughter Kelly as a maid? My father's words made Olivia, who had been full of energy, turn pale and freeze. She started trembling. Ignoring her, my father continued, And you assumed I was homeless without even meeting me. That's quite rude of you. My father glared at Olivia, who started to panic. No, I didn't know Kelly's father was you. Having you join the family is more than welcome, right, Scott? Olivia said desperately, looking to Scott for support. Yes, of course, Scott replied, clearly feeling pressured by Olivia. Olivia tried to justify herself to my father, saying, If I had known, I would have behaved more politely. Please understand, my earlier comments were out of jealousy. I was afraid of losing my son. I was dumbfounded listening to Olivia. She had been looking down on me and my father, but now she was trying to change her tone just because she knew who my father was. She even said, Kelly is a wonderful woman who resembles Richard. Watching their interaction, I thought, I can't let my father be troubled any further. This is my issue. I should be the one to speak up to Olivia. So I told her, I'm breaking off the engagement with Scott. There's no way you'll become family with my dad. What? Kelly, please reconsider. This is my chance to become family with Richard, Olivia said, looking almost tearful. Despite all her terrible behavior towards me, her tearful face couldn't be trusted. I looked at Olivia coldly, but she still thought she could convince me. Seeing me silent, she smiled and said, You want to marry Scott, don't you? I won't oppose it anymore. It's okay, I'll do anything for you. Olivia was desperate to become part of my father's family, willing to do anything, which was a complete change from her earlier attitude. I felt contempt for Olivia's quick change of heart. Softly, I said no, thank you. What? What did you say? Olivia tilted her head, pretending not to hear me. This time, I shouted louder, I absolutely do not want to become family with you. Olivia was shocked by my outburst. I confronted her. You made rude remarks about my job and spoke terribly about my father. I can never forgive that. I made my stance clear. Olivia, realizing she couldn't convince me, turned to my father and said with a smile, Kelly says this, but Richard, you want your daughter to be happy, right? Our family is wealthy, and she'll be happy with us. Some people think money brings happiness, but not me. My father, understanding my feelings, responded to Olivia, Kelly values love over money. Besides, our family has money. I, being an actor, earn a decent amount. Olivia was at a loss for words. It wasn't surprising my father is a well-known actor who appears often in dramas and doesn't struggle with money. Given our family's wealth, there's no reason for me to marry just for money. Olivia fell silent, unable to come up with a good argument. Then my father continued, You say you're a fan of mine, but I despise anyone who mistreats my precious daughter. Could you please not call yourself a fan anymore? Saying this, my father glared at Olivia. She burst into tears and said, If Richard hates me, I won't be able to live. Olivia sobbed uncontrollably. Scott, who had been silent until now, began to speak. You've been quite bold, Kelly. You'll regret it if you break off our engagement. No one will want someone like you, he laughed. Wait a minute, Scott. Olivia tried to stop him, worried about my father's reaction, but Scott continued, I chose a plain woman like you, thinking you'd be obedient. I planned to cheat on you with prettier girls once we were married. Now my plan's ruined. Hearing Scott talk about such things made me realize I had made the right decision. I calmly realized that Scott never loved me. He just wanted a woman who would obey him. My love for Scott had faded a long time ago. While I was thinking this, Scott kept making selfish statements. My father gritted his teeth, looking like he might grab Scott at any moment. It seemed like my turn to fight back. Dad, wait, I said, stopping my father. I let out a smile while still wearing my sunglasses. What's up? Scott seemed a bit surprised by my calm smile. Is this still plain? I asked, taking off the sunglasses with a flourish. Scott froze, staring at my face. I had applied makeup after meeting my father and crying. Normally, I only wore foundation, but now I had on eyeshadow, mascara, and eyeliner. Just a bit of eye makeup had significantly changed my appearance. Is that really you, Kelly? Scott's face turned a bit red. He seemed mesmerized by my makeup-enhanced face. Yes, it's me. I've always downplayed my looks to avoid standing out, but I've decided to stop hiding myself, I said. Until now, I had tried to avoid attention because of my father's fame, but being insulted by Scott and Olivia made me realize it was okay to stand out a bit and show my true self. Scott, with a flushed face, said, If you had been like this from the start, I would have been nice to you. We can still start over. Come on, let's get engaged again, and introduce me to some beautiful actresses through your father. Who would continue with the engagement now, especially with the nerve to ask for actress introductions? I made my stance clear to Scott. The engagement is over. I don't need someone like you anymore. I'll cancel the wedding venue too. What? Scott was stunned, but I wasn't going to let him off easily. Of course, you'll be bearing the cancellation fee for the wedding venue. That's only fair, I continued. Olivia exclaimed in confusion. Wait a minute, it's too much to bear the entire cost. Scott, looking perplexed, couldn't come up with a response. Then my father spoke up. Why not have Scott's father cover it? With all those luxury cars, it shouldn't be a problem, right? My father said this with a refreshing smile. I played my trump card. If you're not happy with this, we can take it to court. Remember, my father is a famous actor, and news about this could stir up his extreme fans who might retaliate. My father has many enthusiastic fans. A critic who once spoke poorly of my father faced severe harassment prank calls and letters with knives. It was so bad that it even made the news. Olivia, remembering that incident, turned pale. She quickly urged Scott, "Scott, you must cover all the cancellation fees. We don't know what might happen." Seeing Olivia's fear, Scott finally understood the seriousness of the situation. "What? Are you kidding?" Scott fell to his knees, looking defeated. "I don't need you in my life." "Dad, let's go home," I said, ignoring the dejected Scott and Olivia. I left with my father. The engagement with Scott was now completely over, and Scott had to pay the full cancellation fee for the wedding venue. It turns out Scott's father is the head of a company, and my father had once appeared in a commercial for that company. Because of this connection, my father informed Scott's father about what happened. Unaware of the situation, Scott's father was furious. He confronted Scott and Olivia harshly, demanding that Scott cover the full cost of the wedding cancellation. As a result, Scott was left with a huge financial burden. The consequences also affected Olivia. She faced divorce initiated by Scott's father. Their treatment of us was one issue, but it wasn't the only reason. Apparently, Olivia had a habit of wasting money, spending a lot on fan activities for my father. The money came from Scott's father, who had already lost patience with her. Moreover, my father revealed that Olivia had sent him inappropriate love letters, writing things like, "I want to divorce and marry you, Richard. My current husband is just a source of money." This enraged Scott's father. Despite Olivia's resistance, the divorce went through with the help of lawyers. I heard rumors that Olivia, saying this wasn't supposed to happen, was now living in tears. She had also been expelled from my father's fan club because of her troublesome behavior. It was probably inevitable. I can't imagine Olivia finding happiness after losing everything. She got what she deserved. Astonishingly, 8 months later, Scott was arrested. He couldn't forget me after I took off my sunglasses that day. Scott started showing up frequently in front of my house. Even after I quit my job, he called me often, begging me to reconsider our engagement, crying on the phone, saying, "I need you, no one else will do." He was only fixated on my looks. Scott cried and clung to his phone, but he was probably only interested in my appearance. The difference between my look before and after makeup was significant. I don't need a man who only cares about looks. I politely refused and then blocked his calls. However, Scott's actions became more intense. I went to the police several times, and sometimes I was even threatened with danger. After a lot of thought, I finally filed a report with the police, and my father agreed with my decision. Eventually, Scott was arrested for trying to break into our house. After his arrest, it seems Scott was fired from his job. Now, all that's left for Scott is a large amount of debt. He probably won't be able to live a decent life anymore. It's the consequence of looking down on people so much. Since then, I've been working as my father's manager. The job is much more challenging than my previous clerical work. I manage my father's schedule, accompany him on site visits, greet people, and negotiate salaries. Before, I only commuted between the company and home, talked to a few people in the office, and mostly worked on the computer. Now, meeting people and talking has become a big part of my job. It's a huge change from before, but I find it incredibly enjoyable. Being a manager is a glamorous job, but it's not just about that. I support my father behind the scenes so he can focus on his acting career. The work hours are irregular, and you need to be adaptable. Most importantly, it's a job that lets me closely support my father. I want to repay him for all the worry I've caused. It's a job I've just started, and there will surely be many challenges, but I want to keep moving forward and do my best alongside my beloved father. Today, I continue to do my best.